Joining us on the line is Megyn Kelly. Megyn, great to talk to you.
Hey, great to be with you, Ben.
So why don't we start by you telling us what is the new enterprise? Because you and I have been chatting about this offline for, a year at this point, but what exactly is the new enterprise and what are you looking to do?
Well, I'm kind of sick of regular media, like most Americans, and I'm sick of the fealty that everyone has to a different corporate master, whether it's a company that runs the media organization or whether it's a politician who, like Trump or whomever, who they don't think they can criticize in any way, shape, or form. And yet I didn't want to go back into traditional media and have to work for one of those organizations and just have an independent voice. I wanted the whole thing to be independent for me, so that I could just do what I wanted to do and say what I wanted to say and have the conversations I wanted to have without, and if somebody doesn't like it, well, right? Like, go watch something else. No problem. I'll take hate watching too. That's okay. But I don't want to be in a position where I have to curtail my language all the time. And I don't think most Americans want to be like that. So hopefully I can be part of this movement that I already see and already listen to, and you're at the forefront of it, of just sort of doing it the way we want to do it and sort of helping civilians, people who are non-media people, find ways of expressing themselves without having to sort of, kowtow to these new corporate standards that don't let you say anything at any time to anybody.
Yeah, Ming, let's talk about that sort of just more broadly. Obviously you've worked for a lot of these big media corporations, and what you do, in those scenarios is very different than what you're allowed to do when you run it yourself. What kind of standards do you see in corporate media that you think are sort of preventing the American people from getting the information they need?
Well, it depends on where you work. It can be understood what you're supposed to do or what you're not supposed to do. I would say it was stressful my last year at Fox if, you weren't sort of getting on board with defending Trump with everything he did. That was a different time, and things have changed there since then. I'm not saying it's like that now, but I definitely at times felt pressure to have an editorial that looked a certain way. And but more than that, it's actually Fox was the least of the problems, honestly. Like, having worked at ABC and NBC and Fox, I would say you have the greatest editorial freedom at Fox of any place I've been. It was much worse at the other place, and separate and apart from them, though, Ben, it's basically just the use of language. So I never let anybody put an editorial bent in my story, but it's what you can't say. It's like, that line needs to come out. I remember having one argument with somebody saying, "What about fair and balanced?" This is not at Fox. I said, "What about fair and balanced?" And the response was, "Well, how about just fair and accurate?" And so it's in the eye of the beholder, right? Like, what's accurate? I like balance. I would appreciate to hear the counter argument, but not everybody will offer it.
Okay, so obviously you're watching the 2020 election as it unfolds, and you were intimately involved in everything involved in 2016. We're about to approach the debates. Let's say that you were given the opportunity to be debate moderator again, which I have a feeling President Trump would not be fond of. But let's say that were to happen again, and you had the opportunity to ask questions to both Trump and to Biden. What would those questions look like? Because, frankly, I thought that you did a good enough job during those debates. That's probably why Trump avoided one where you were specifically slated to be a moderator.
Yeah, I actually think Trump would take me. If if my hat were in the ring, I think he'd say fine, because he knows I'm tough, but I'd be tough on Biden too. And, I've already thrown my fastest fastball at Trump and he handled it just fine. So, like, how much more contentious could it be? But I'll tell you, speaking of that, I have to think about Trump. I'd probably ask him something about the incongruity between the way he governs and the way he tweets. Like, I know you've made this point, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. He undermines everything with his tweets. And I know it's personally cathartic to him, or sometimes it's strategic. He's trying to distract from something in the news. But if he never tweeted at all and we just had the Trump agenda, I feel like he'd be rolling right into a second term, even with Corona. So I'd craft a question around that. But with Biden, I would 100% ask him about Tara Reid. 100%, I'd ask him about her. If I were clever enough, I'd come up with a way to check his cognitive abilities. Like, make him do complex math on the spot, or something so we could really just see for ourselves. Like, I don't know, I'd have to think about it, but I don't think that mine, has been explored enough. And I feel like he did that one in interview with Mika Brzezinski, and she did an okay job. It was fine. There was a lot left on the floor, though, and he's never been pressed about it again. The media's not interested. And trust me, I'd be just the girl to do it.
So let's talk about the fact that the media has been so uninterested in asking questions of Biden. He's put a lid on his campaign, meaning that he has not gone out into public for 6 of the last 9 days. He's just told the media willy-nilly, I'm not leaving, right? This basement is my home, and I'm never leaving this basement. I'm not speaking to you. And he's doing it like 9:30 a.m., and there are things happening in the world. Like there's a Supreme Court nomination that's coming up. There are riots in Louisville. Like things are actually happening in the world. And he has told the media that he has just basically taken the day off, and they're just eating it. I mean, it's unbelievable to me that the media have no serious questions to ask his campaign about why he's doing it. They're going out there and playing defense for him. They're saying things like, well, he's probably prepping for the debate, or he probably has other things to do. And I mean, I remember when there was a running counter for many members of the media on how many days it had been since Trump had done like a formal press conference, even though he was coming out every 4 days and just randomly taking questions on the tarmac. It's pretty incredible to see the media bias truly exposed in this election cycle.
Well, I picture Biden like in a beanbag with darts or like, I don't know, Netflix and some popcorn. And he's like, this is awesome. I'm just going to cruise my way right into the White House because I'm getting away with this. It's working. And I don't have much longer to go, right? Like, I think it's brilliant. And if you're worried about his cognitive abilities, just look at his brilliant strategy. It's actually quite smart. The more he talks, the worse it's going to get for him. He can just let Trump be Trump. And, you know, Trump always finds a way to, you know, wound himself. And so we're almost there. He's like done it for 6 months now. What's one more teeny tiny month? You know, he got through a lot of hard times by doing that, and nobody is going to press him. The media obviously has no interest in pressing him on anything. Even like his old plagiarism scandal. Where's that? Like, how did that just suddenly not matter anymore? Like, I think it's still relevant. Anyway, I think it's a good strategy. It could work. But I think that's why the SCOTUS nomination is probably the best thing that's happened to Trump, because Biden's going to have to talk about it. And these riots, he's going to have to talk about it.
It seems like he ran against the hardest possible line. I mean, he won because the alternative was Bernie Sanders. And if he wants to lock down okay, well, he's just going to be like a normal guy who's going to bring back normalcy, why not just say, listen, we're not wrecking the institutions. The best solution to governance you don't like is to elect me and a bunch of Democrats in the Senate to do a bunch of things that you do like. We're not going to burn down the institutions. We're not going to stand in favor of riots. We're going to tell Antifa that they should go to jail. Like, it seems to me like if you're going to campaign as a moderate, campaign as a moderate. But he's been able to have it both ways so far. And I wonder if Trump will clock him on that.
It's a great point. And think about what a moment it would be. Remember in the movie Primary Colors, where John Travolta played Bill Clinton, and Larry Hagman came in as the candidate who he was against Clinton and well, you know, the fake Clinton. And he came in, and at the last minute, he was like, I'm just going to give blood. He was sort of this above it all statesman. I don't know if you've seen the movie. It's so good. And it turned out to be a total act. And it was insincere the whole time. But even if Biden could have an act that looked reasonable and above the fray, I think it would appeal to those suburban women who they're arguing over. I think, you know, if he could say, we're not going to do it. This has been an escalation of a nuclear judicial war. Both sides have blood on their hands in this war, and I'm going to be the one to stop it. The rules are the sitting president gets to nominate the next justice, and the Senate gets to confirm or not confirm. And that's what's going to happen here. And if you don't like that result, then you need to elect Democrats, and we'll switch it. It'll take some time, but we will switch it. There are some older Supreme Court justices, so you got to keep Dems in the Senate. You got to keep Dem in the White House. But now this is where this stops, right here. I think it'd be a great moment for him.
So the other issue that you mentioned as one that Biden's going to have to answer on is all the racial conflict in the cities. And one of the things that we've seen from Biden is that he continues to sort of egg it on. I mean, he's not saying, he said violence is bad, he said looting is bad, but he refuses to condemn by name either Antifa or BLM. And he continues to refer to what's going on as a quote unquote racial reckoning, which is an extraordinary way of putting what we have seen right now, which is legitimately riots, attacks on police officers based on fact patterns that do not justify the ire. I mean, what we're watching in Louisville right now, where 2 police officers were shot last night as we record this, and it's all over a Breonna Taylor case in which there is no legal way to charge those officers with the murder of Breonna Taylor. It just does not exist. They were fired upon by somebody in the apartment. They returned fire. She was in the path of fire. She ends up dying. That's a tragedy. That is not a crime. And the fact that Biden is unwilling to quell those waters a little bit, I mean, that's pretty radical stuff from him, it seems.
They're never going to. In the same way BLM has corporate America hostage, it certainly has the Democratic Party hostage. And the thing that bothers me about it, Ben, as a lawyer, which I know you are as well, although I went to Albany Law School, not Harvard, is it isn't factual. It's not factual. It is factual that there is racism inside the United States. And we need to, on a case-by-case basis, look hard to see whether we believe this is one of them. You know, I mean, I'll take the Central Park lady and the bird watcher, right? I would have been fine with that situation if she hadn't mentioned that she was going to tell the police he was black, right? That was a racist thing to do and say. And she's paid a price for it. But you have to look at situations one by one. And the problem that's happening now with this, hate the police movement is that they refuse to do that. They refuse to look at the Jacob Blake situation and, recognize that the evidence appears to be that the man was armed. He definitely had a scuffle with police. He got tased. He kept fighting. He had a cop in a headlock. I mean, I could go on. It's a problem. Most of us don't have really negative interactions with the cops that turn potentially deadly because if we ever get pulled over, we submit. And that's what most men do, because most men are the ones having the interactions with cops, white and black. Breonna Taylor is a tragedy. It is awful. And the AG down there was right and very eloquent in speaking about it. But what was the cop supposed to do when he took a bullet in the femoral artery? I mean, really, what was he supposed to do? What would you do? And even in the Jacob Blake situation, the cop fired when Jacob Blake allegedly pulled a knife and people were yelling. They heard the cops yelling, drop the knife. And he didn't, right? So in that situation, if you're allowed to fire the first bullet, Ben, you're allowed to fire 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The only legal test is whether the officer had a reasonable fear of dying or great bodily injury. And once the answer to that has been decided to be yes, he can shoot to kill. The cops, they don't shoot to maim. It may not be nice, you may not like it, but the law affords these officers a lot of leeway because it understands they're in life and death situations where they have to make split-second decisions, and it's really tough to armchair quarterback it. And by the way, they're doing it based on something we don't even know is relevant, which is race. Where's the proof that race had anything to do with Jacob Blake, anything to do with Breonna Taylor, and even to do with George Floyd, which is a special case because the brutality was so awful and really indefensible. But where has it been proven that race was involved?
I mean, this whole discussion leads to a real question, which is we've seen all of this unrest, and yet it's not reflected in the polls for Trump. You would figure that this would redound to Trump's benefit. You'd see some sort of national gain or gain in Wisconsin where there are riots in Kenosha or gains in Pennsylvania or gains in Michigan. And you're not seeing significant gains for Trump on this issue, which raises a couple of possibilities to me. One is that it's all baked into the cake. The election's basically over one way or the other. People have their opinions of Trump, and that ain't changing. And that's just a question of turnout. And that's possibility number one, which seems plausible. The other possibility is that there are a lot of people in this country, particularly suburban white women, who hate discussions about race. They think that the goal here is to get beyond race and to actually, live our lives beyond race. And they've been offered two possible pathways to do this. One is the sort of conservative response, which is, okay, we'll take each individual case individually, we'll analyze it, and we will fight against it when we see it. And then there's the sort of left-wing view, which is you can alleviate all problems simply by declaring that the system itself is racist, that you yourself have been a repository of white privilege. And by doing this, even just by saying these words, by repeating these words, you are now a member of the anti-racist coterie, and you can expect that everyone will treat you with a level of respect, and you get to feel superior to all these other people who have not done this. And I wonder if that second pitch is actually the pitch that is winning at this point.
I don't think so. I really don't. I just think the loud people are saying that, and people are too afraid to say what they really think, which is what? What? Right? I mean, I was looking up critical race theory the other day because I understood they were doing all these sort of forced anti-bias classes, but I didn't totally understand what that meant. And, one of the things they ask you to do in these critical race theory classes, right, that you're supposed to go to, is to just be quiet and sit with your racism. It's like, who wants to do that? What suburban woman is like, well, I mean, here on the Upper West Side, a lot of them, but like, no normal person is like, yes, I will sit alone with my, come on. I mean, most people are fair and they object to the re-racialization of the country that's being forced on us right now, right? It's like there is a school here in New York in which they are pushing to offer free tutoring to only the Black students and not the white students in the coming year. I mean, what sense does that make? What about the Black student both of whose parents went to Harvard and the parents work on Wall Street versus the white student whose mother had cancer last year. She's a single mom and they're really struggling and he might be having academic issues. Like that, we're seeing that. We're seeing that in our schools. We're seeing that in our corporations. And I actually do think, if anything, it has an effect on people of saying, I'll give you my vote on November 3rd. We'll get to it on November 3rd when it is between me and the polling booth, and it's really none of your damn business. Because people are terrified to say that they like Donald Trump right now.
So that is the big question, is whether it's possible that all these polls are just skewed, that there is this big shy Tory vote. A lot of people out there who are willing to vote for Trump aren't going to say publicly that they're willing to vote for Trump, aren't picking up the phones when the pollsters question them or lie, or whether there are a bunch of people who are first-time voters who are not showing up in these polls, because usually likely voter models pick people who have voted before. The best gauge of a likely voter is a person who has already voted. It's possible that maybe there are a lot of people out there in rural America who are first-time voters planning on voting for Trump, in the same way that there were a lot of people who were not taken into account in state polls in 2012 for Obama. And it was a lot of first-time black voters who were not taken into account in some of those state polls. How big do you think that shy Tory vote is, the number of people who just could vote for Trump and just aren't telling anybody about it?
I think it's huge. And I don't have any scientific data to tell you, to cite that based on, other than the fact that he won the last time despite the polls. And his polling deficit is around where it was, right, with Hillary this time during the last election cycle. But I will tell you this. I'm in a unique position, sort of, because I worked at Fox News for 13 and a half years. And people know I'm not a leftist, right? I'm not like a hardcore right-wing person either, but I'm not a leftist. And so they know all this about me, but I live on the Upper West Side. And most of my friends are Democrats. I'm in New York City. Most of the city is Democrat. And so people will talk to me from both sides, right? Like they'll tell me. And my Democrat friends, a lot of them will privately, when we're alone, express a lot of these feelings. And I do think, sort of that more centrist Democrat is gettable by Trump, but they would never say that in polite circles, ever. And I think a lot of Republicans who were turned off by Trump and still hate the tweets and think he's too thin-skinned and all, the stupid attacks, all that stuff, they do worry about defunding the police in places like New York City, where they really did take away $1 billion from the cops. And you can see it in everything from overflowing garbage on every street corner to a 1-year-old who got shot in his stroller down in Brooklyn. You might not say that to a pollster, because whatever you say today, they call you a racist, they call you a bigot, they call you whatever. But I think when it's election day, I do think there's a stronger than ever shy Trump voter.
So on a different topic, I wanted to ask you about what it's like to be a powerful woman in media. So there's been a lot of talk about this from the left. The left seems to be incredibly hypocritical about which particular women in media they defend, obviously. If you are, a powerful woman on Capitol Hill and you're a Republican, then I guess you don't count as a woman. If you're a powerful woman who is not of the hard left in media, then you get treated like you get treated, or like my friend Megyn McCain has been treated by the media, which is as a sort of outcast. It seems female solidarity immediately goes by the wayside, as does powerful feminism, as soon as the woman you're talking about doesn't abide by a particular set of political principles.
100%. I mean, I remember after that Trump debate when Trump was talking about, my period and calling me a bimbo and all this stuff, like, which wasn't great, but like, you would think that if ever there were a moment for like now, right, to like pipe in with its holier than thou comments, that would have been one. Bubkiss. They had said nothing. I laugh. I mean, trust me, I don't need their defense. But what's been done to Megyn at The View and in response to those segments on The View, what was done to Sarah Palin, what isn't done for Nikki Haley, for Melania Trump. Oh my God, the difference in media coverage between Michelle Obama and Melania Trump. I mean, need you look any further? It's absurd. It's awful. I mean, Melania Trump is this elegant, beautiful, intelligent, 5-language speaking, awesome first lady who's caused very little controversy. She's trying to stop bullying. I get the contradiction with Trump, but we're talking about Melania Trump now. Nothing. She hasn't been on any magazine cover. Can you imagine? Not on Vogue, and Anna Wintour's like, who? And meanwhile, Michelle Obama is like the second coming. It's like Jesus Christ came back down, and here she is. So anyway, it's stomach turning to me, but it's just yet another of the million examples of the media bias that's out there. And I feel like not even just conservatives, people who are anywhere near the center or right of center, they're on their own. It's like you're going to have to forge on without the media, without Hollywood, without, sadly, academia. I mean, I don't know about you, but like I worry about it now because I definitely don't want to send my kids to some far left progressive college, and they're little now. They're 11, 9, and 7. But like at some point, we're going to have to make a decision on that. And I don't even know what's available. Like, what's left? The University of Chicago used to seem like they were sort of resisting the no safe spaces thing or the safe spaces thing. And then this year they just said, like, the only people we want applying for professorships in the English department are people who promise they're going to focus only on Black studies. Or like, well, I mean, maybe it could be one. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't know where there is. I mean, other than Liberty, which is like, got its own problems this year. I don't know where you go.
Yeah, Hillsdale is going to be overwhelmed with applications. Right. My feeling on that is that, honestly, this is the fault of conservative employers who have decided that they're going to use the same metrics for employment as all other employers, which is they're going to use the sorting mechanism of colleges in order to pick people. Because that's all colleges really are. If you got a poli-sci degree from UCLA, then all that means is that you scored above 1,400 on the SATs. It does not mean you're qualified for an actual human job. Though the way you become qualified for an actual human job is to basically perform the actual human job. And so here at Daily Wire, my business partner, Jeremy, he didn't graduate from college. The president of the company, Caleb Robinson, he didn't, I believe, graduate from college. So 2 of the 3 leaders of the company didn't graduate from college. So we have a rule. We don't require colleges on your application, and we will not grant you extra points in the application process for having gone to college until conservatives start to actually treat people as individuals as opposed to, graduates of particular schools is going to be a serious problem. But, I think that's coming. I don't know. I mean, I will say, you look at Fox News and the lineup there. I mean, I can speak to when I was there, right? It was like Brett, he didn't go to some fancy college. I don't even remember where he went. Then I'm just trying to go through the lineup. O'Reilly likes to say he went to Harvard, but he didn't really go to Harvard. He went to Marist, I think. And like he kind of counts that 1 year at the Harvard Kennedy School, which everyone knows doesn't really count. So he didn't really go to Harvard like Ben Shapiro did. Hannity didn't go to college. And I went to Syracuse, where there was no ivy on the walls, but it was a great time. I'll tell you that. It was a lot of fun times. Anyway, I think there's a reason Roger Ailes cast the lineup like that, because Fox then and now has an ability to understand who can speak to regular people. Roger didn't want a bunch of, first in their class Yaleys who are going to be like, oh my God, look at all these dumbasses at home. He's like, he knew that would be alienating. He didn't want it. And let me tell you, it was a very different situation when I went over to the place that came next. So Megyn, where can people find your new material? Where can they find your new podcast, and how can they access it and help you out?
Okay, so it's going to be the Megyn Kelly Show, and it's going to be wherever podcasts are available, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, all of them. It's going to be free, so you don't have to pay anything. Free of corporate overlords and free to you. And it's going to, it launches the week of the 28th, and you're one of our very first guests.
Well, it should be fantastic. Megyn Kelly, congratulations on the launch of the podcast. I've been encouraging you to do it for literally years at this point, so I'm really excited to see how it does. I think it's going to explode. Megyn, really appreciate the time. Great to talk to you.
I'm in your debt, Ben. Thank you so much.